I'd like you to meet Wendy Andrews. She's from the Sunshine Coast. We're still here at Listening to Country Water Yarning Circles, and I just wanted to bring to the attention the aspect of taking our communication skills within the yarning circles to mainstream community, society, even our friends across the dinner table. Wendy brought up something that resonated with me about how she feels about talking about water and the relationship she has with it, or the lack of the relationship she has with it. So I just would like for you to communicate and express yourself on those feelings towards water.
Okay, well, I had a question in the group, and it's how do I come to have a felt sense of water? How do I come to have a felt sense of water in my body as a sacred thing? Because I understand that that's what First Nations people have, and I understand it on an intellectual level, and it all sounds great, but I think there's a difference with what my understanding is and what their understanding is, and I'm looking for ways to bridge that. And I guess from what I've learned, I come from a trauma background and a lot of healing and recovery work, and that's been my path in. So from what I've learned on that path is that what happens to all of us in white culture is we come in the same. We come in the same as First Nations babies, basically. But it's the process of what happens to us from the moment we're born. We look at our parents and the disconnect is there. They're not seeing our ancestors. They're not feeling their own ancestors. We are picking that up right from the start, disconnect. And over time, and all the parenting practices, our whole culture, we learn disconnect, and we learn to live from our neck up, basically, and ignore the rest of our body. And then when we have other trauma on top of that, and we're not allowed access to our healing emotions, which is what tears and trembling and all those sorts of things are, they're cut off to us, and we're discouraged from those from the moment we're born, with good intentions. But yes, that it for safety reasons, what our psyche does is take us off out of our body. And when the trauma's big enough, you can eventually live from that place. And I think a lot of us do that, and a lot don't even realise it because it's so our normal, but we are so disassociated. I used to liken it to the film Men in Black, where there's the very tall alien, and at some point, when he's dead, a little bit in his forehead is opened up, and there's the tiny exhausted alien in there dying. And I realised that was me. I felt that's how I feel. I'm operating this enormous body from somewhere else, and it's exhausting. And so I started doing healing work that brought me back into my body. A few different modalities, somatic experiencing, mindfulness, and then I started noticing sensations in my body that I'd had no idea about, but obviously were always there, and just, slight tinglings and all sorts of things, and I've started paying attention to that. And the more I've started paying attention to that, I've realised, I've just automatically started saying I'm healing up and down the generations. So I didn't know why I was saying that, but I'm realising it's about ancestral healing. And then I started to learn to feel when the ancestors with me and inside me. But what I feel like I don't have is that understanding of water as a sacred living entity, and which is what attracted me to coming to this weekend. I really wanted to understand that and feel it. And it's like trying to swim through thick mud of the layers of colonisation, the layers of things that have happened all our lives that make it extremely difficult to get to that. And I think sometimes, from what I've learned, there's a struggle for First Nations people sometimes to understand why we don't understand, you know, that what is so obvious to them because they've grown up in it their whole lives. It's their, you know, it's been passed down and everything. It must be very hard to grasp.
May I just ask you, how many generations are you with us within Australia?
I'm an immigrant. Yeah, I'm 5th generation New Zealand.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm also an immigrant as well. But I've always held strong connection with Mother Nature. So your ancestors that you're speaking about, would you say that was more like the external energy, or is it actually the bodies of people from before you around you protecting you, or is it the spiritual connection with the living beings of the trees and the plants, or is it more to do with energy and cosmos, or is it just a combination of all of that?
It's a bit of a combination, but I've done work on making direct contact with the well ancestors, which this is another thing that's hard for us to grasp because we think of ancestral work and, you know, oh God, we don't want to go back and find those people. And someone was saying that in the room, but the path that I've taken is we go back at least 1,000 years to find and make contact with well ancestors. And the work is probably best known as shamanic trance work. I don't use those words because that's appropriation, but I've had direct lived experience of, and you know, and of course there was doubt at first, and you know, I'd have images flash into my mind, and it couldn't possibly be anything. But that is part of colonisation as well. Doubt is colonisation, and once you start believing it and not questioning it, yes, I have direct ancestors and they've done all the healing of that lineage. It's asking them to do the work, and yes, I feel them with me.
So with everything that you're saying, I would say you're pretty spiritual and you're pretty connected, and yet you're still having that problem with actually finding the spiritual connection and sacredness of water.
Yes.
And this is what we're going to come up against if we take what we've learnt from the elders into mainstream society. How are we going to communicate this without them giving us strange looks and wondering what the hell we're talking about, because they are so disconnected.
Yeah.
And the problems that we're facing in everyday life, not just water or lack of water, drought, it's everything to do with our way of living is making us sick.
Yes.
And if somebody as spiritual as you are, and you are fairly connected, I would say, is having trouble, then how do we communicate with the rest of them? What words do we use? How do we make them understand that water is so important? Without water we have no life. I learnt something about storytelling, that it doesn't exist without flowing water, and that it was halted when within this drought our First Nations people can't tell their stories because there is no water running out there in their countries, and that's a real problem. And yet how do we understand that? Because our cultures are so different. We have to find a way of coming together, and it's not assimilation, it's unity, so that we still recognise both cultures but we work together for the greater good.
Yeah.
And I just, you just resonated with me so much with that. I'm head and this is body, and it's separate, and we need to find a way of joining ourselves and healing ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
And water is going to do it, I believe.
And I'm pretty I'm banking on the 100th monkey principle, that, you know, it's only going to take about 3% of us getting this, and those 3% for you know, the period of colonisation and since witch burning and everything, the knowledge that we have and what lives in our bodies and our connection with spirit that we understand has been pathologised, and we've been put in institutions and drugged. it's actually finding those people. And I connected with, say, 3 or 4 people in the room this weekend, white people, and we're it. Yeah, and see, and I've got I call them, they're goosebumps, I call them truth bumps. I know the ancestors, that's the signal that what I'm speaking is truth. I feel it in my thighs and I get goosebumps all over my scalp. And I think we only have to reach us. We only have to reach those people and to just break through little layers. Something as simple as knowing that our tears are healing, that it is an act of rebellion to cry. And that's why, you know, it was brave for me last night to sit there and cry when the whale music was playing and not wipe away my tears. That is an act of resistance and activism in our culture, the way that it is. Yeah. And so it's only, you know, it's reaching us. We have it, we've got it. We're the people with the answers, and we've always had them, and that's why we've been repressed a lot. But you know, my services would have been paid for in the past to wail at funerals and things, you know, but instead I can't go to them because I'm what are the words? I'm such a mess, and other people can't feel it. You know, they don't want you to see you crying because it's touching on their pain. Okay. So the more that we do that and connect amongst ourselves, I think there's enough of us that we're the ones to reach, that will start making little changes that will be enough to start off with.
So with what Uncle Kev's talking about, with dropping the pebble in the water and the ripples go out.
Yes.
And we're that pebble. And off we go.
Yes, we're the pebble and the first ripples. Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's what we do with that, and combined with how we change raising children. They're the 2 main things.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for talking.
You're welcome. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.